Welcome back to the Hip Hop Report. This is Rambo Hustle, and today we'll be discussing Vince Staples' brand new album, Crybaby. Now, one of my favorite quotes in the last 2 weeks that we've been kind of discussing and battling dweeb rap was the idea that hip hop was never created to make white people feel comfortable. And honestly, I think that just goes for everybody, right? Because hip hop was always created with the idea of giving communities that didn't have a voice, of speaking up against systemic racism, oppression, and discrimination as a whole, both in Latin music and Black music. It was all based on the idea that we could give people a voice to speak out against things that were not right in the community. And so we enter Vince Staples, a guy, an artist that comes from Long Beach, California. You automatically know that he's familiar with gang culture because that's where Snoop's from. Instead of him going into that space and trying to milk the Long Beach name to say, hey, look at gang culture, look how cool it is, he's actually an artist that has taken it upon himself to not just speak on societal issues, but also shed light in them in a way that is just dynamic and just impactful in so many ways. Not just from his Netflix 2-season show that he had that was both humorous, but also extremely heavy in tonality, but also in the way that he speaks in interviews. However, in his interviews where you catch very humorous and comedic type of flavor from Vince Staples every time he speaks and the way he delivers his ideas, it also reminds me of Richard Pryor a lot, where he's giving you really dark and deep and heavy information, but he's doing it in a way that you can kind of laugh it off. He has a very like stand-up comedic kind of vibe to him whenever he speaks in interviews and podcasts and things like that. And I've always kind of appreciated that because it's really hard to walk that line between, serious topic but consumable delivery. And I think he does that. Now, if you've ever had a rock phase or a skateboarding phase or a grunge or emo phase, this is the album for you. Now, if you're a make-believe hip-hop fan that really just likes rap music about women, fucking bottles and bullshit, this is not the project for you. If you're a person that is anti-education in hip-hop, and again, it's not about educating you, it's about shedding light on the artist's life experiences to motivate you to want to be educated, not just into the artist itself, but educated in the sense of, look, you either are not familiar, you're in the suburbs somewhere and you've never had to struggle a day in your life for a plate of food, and this creates a level of empathy from you, or you relate to it and then maybe you try to find a better way to go about life so you don't have to make these hard decisions. I mean, there's so many issues and social commentary that Vince tackles in this project, not just in the cover, which is clearly a newborn baby, a fat newborn baby that looks like Donald Trump. He even has the yellow comb over, and he has a diaper made of the American flag. This is clearly a reference into not just Trump, but also the United States of America and how we are the richest, wealthiest, freest, and also the most powerful country in the world. Yet our country and some of our communities are some of the most impoverished and least well-off communities in the world. And that basically happens because we don't care. Our government doesn't care. Essentially, the way that our country is set up is a joke to most countries around the world, where most countries look at the US and say, how do you have so much money and so much power and so much freedom, and yet you have people that live in these conditions? And to me, this is the whole undertone of Crybaby, is the idea of shedding light on a country that is wealthy and ruling in power. They still don't allow themselves to actually create any level of equality at all, not financially, not socially, and not within the rights of the people, and we hear that. We started the project off with 3 main singles: Blackberry Marmalade, White Flag, and Cotton. Now with Blackberry Marmalade, it was a first-person shooter music video, which honestly is one of the strongest parts of this rollout. with Vince Staples, which he started with a live performance of the entire project at midnight the night that it dropped. So where most artists are trying to milk the numbers, milk the streams, and milk their fans for about everything they can to get every stream and drive everyone to one link, Vince said, you know what? I don't care about none of that, because as you guys know, Vince Staples makes music for sync. And so he's not too worried about the streaming because he's going to make his money on the back end. Vince decided to do a live performance of the entire album for free on YouTube the night that his album dropped. So not only did his album drop, but you were able to actually experience it in a live performance format the second it dropped at midnight in a red lit scenario, allowing him to really present the music firsthand, face to face with his fan base and his audience. And I personally, I would love to see more artists take the time to create production this way, allowing them to really connect with their fan base on a more heavier and more submersive level. That way it's not just, hey, here's my album, press play, but it's like, no, I'm really putting my best foot forward to actually give you a full experience of a live performance for you to like hear the music from me directly, and then later go in and play the album on your own. Now, look, the album is fantastic. Like I said, it's rock heavy, it's grungy, it's like that the entire way. It's not like we're gonna get like a couple rock records and then he's gonna go off on like a rap and B record and then maybe make some ballads. Like, no, this entire thing, all 35 minutes, is hard. It's heavy, and it tackles a lot of different subjects that I think are extremely pivotal for any hip hop artist to tackle. Again, it's not about making only serious social music. It's not about making only party music. It's about balance. However, this album is not balanced. This album is in your face and straight to the point. Starting with Blackberry Marmalade, which, like I said, has that first-person shooter where ultimately, not only is he showing you the violence and the trauma that is created through the environment that he's growing up around, but it obviously ends up in a tragedy. He ends up getting shot, and that's how the video ends. Now, in Go Go Gorilla, he also kind of basically creates a catchy hook from something that is essentially a stereotype to his own demise, a stereotype that his own community has created for him, where the entire hook of the record is an insult to himself and his community. But the way that he does it is genius, because he's basically creating a catchy racial slur out of the record, and it's honestly, a lot of these records are basically made to be catchy, but also to make you think about why it's catchy and to make you realize that what you're actually repeating is not just insulting, but it's the reality of the world that we live in. It's the reality of the country that we live in. You know, in White Flag, which is obviously a reference to waving the white flag as in I give up, I don't want to fight no more, which is exactly what he says on the record. He is actually painting a American flag in white. And with that said, that could be taken a lot of different ways. I think anything that's minimalist like this has the ability to be interpreted by different people in different ways to allow the art to kind of live on its own through the artist. Now, one of my favorite records on this project is TV Guide, because, not only is it still true to the messaging and the direction that Vince Staples has carried throughout this whole project, but also I think it might be one of the most universal records on this, because who doesn't understand the damage that TV, your cell phones, the algorithm, and just our obsession with consumption of content and visual stimulation has created in the country. Now, in Big Bad Wolf, he replicates the sample from Slick Rick that Nas and Ye used in the collaboration album that they did. He kind of reflips that, and within that, he also mentioned Don't Want to Hear Another Jingle from the Jigaboos, which obviously is essentially just a shot at a lot of the artists that make very basic and simple records that really say nothing. It's just about, generating the revenue from the bag, from the streams, and basically, like I said before, milking the fans for all they worth. And then he also mentioned the idea of dry snitching interviews, something that has become extremely popular nowadays with people jumping on podcasts, jumping on streams, and and basically giving out every other person's information. Now, this is something that everyone's basically more or less a victim of, or at least guilty of, because everyone's talking, myself included. This is the reason why I specifically like to focus on the music and not get stuck in, discussing people's gossip or who they're dating or all these other miscellaneous things that don't have anything to do with the music. Now, if what you're talking about in the music has something to do with the gossip, then at that point we can take it from the music and address it with you guys, and we can create a conversation around it. But for me to go to TMZ or All Hip Hop or something like that and say report on an artist that got shot because whatever reason, and I've never reported on that artist before, I would never do that. Now, after that, we got Only an American, where he spotlights the idea that, a lot of these issues, like I said before, are specifically prevalent in America. And they're embarrassing to America because around the world, other countries look at America, and regardless that we are the freest and the wealthiest and the most powerful, we still have some of the most ridiculous issues that shouldn't even be issues. Because if your government cared about your people, and if you were trying to solve these very basic and practical issues that we have in society, like systemic racism, police brutality, gun violence, and things like that, it would be a very easy fix if you actually wanted to fix it. After all, they say they want to fix it, but they don't actually want to fix it, because if they did, they would. Do You Know the Devil is a very similar story, where he's basically talking about his lack of options and how he feels trapped in this direction of, well, I want to survive and I want to succeed, but it seems like the only way that I can do that is through these very particular avenues. I feel limited into what I can choose. And so I think within that space, you can really dive into many different directions of what those choices are. But at the end of the day, he understands that, his options are very limited, and they seem to all lead to him having to meet the devil and then decide whether he's going to collaborate with him or ignore him. But obviously at that point, now you're trying to decide if that's going to cause your demise, if that's going to destroy any potential for you to succeed. Because if you're not playing the game by the people that have the power and that can help you play the game and succeed and come out on top, then, at the detriment of your own of your own health and your own lifeline, then is it worth it? And I think that's a struggle that a lot of artists and a lot of young kids from shitty communities have to deal with, because at the end of the day, it's you do want to succeed, you do want to provide for your family, you do want to get out of your current scenario, but how do you do that without being subjected to, obviously, the devil? And of course, our third single, Cotton, which was more of a history lesson. And again, not a history lesson like we're going to teach you about history, but the history of Vince, of him growing up, of his lineage, of his history, of Black people's history in this country. And, rightfully titled Cotton, because it tells the story of how we got to where we're at today. And despite much progress that we've made as a country, I would say that a lot of the, minority communities, we're still facing some of the same issues that were very much prevalent years ago. And that's because the people in power don't want change, because they are in power. And if you're in power, you don't want change. You want to be able to stay in that position as long as you can, because if you lose that position, then you lose the comfort of that position. But again, as we said before, hip hop was never created to make white people feel comfortable, or anybody for that matter. And I think this album executes that perfectly. Even with the last record, 7 in the Morning, where it basically generates the idea that you're in a military, you are getting ready for war, you're waking up early, you're going to do calisthenics, you're going to do that just so you can go kill another person, just so you can go destroy somebody else's livelihood. And for me, from the beginning of this album all the way down to track 10, there's a very clear message that Vince Staples is is giving out, and I think he does a great job of putting that together. Not only that, but actually keeping a same and similar soundscape to where you can listen to this whole project and it sounds cohesive, but it doesn't sound repetitive. It doesn't sound like he's repeating any of the records, and they all have their own sonic soundscape that they live in. And I think within that space, you really get a great experience with this album. And if you're somebody that appreciates hip hop for what it's supposed to be, which is a voice, then this is definitely an album you want to check out. With that being said, Vince Staples' Crybaby, available everywhere now.
Subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel. If you want the latest and greatest, do it for the game. Music breaks, these are the breaks. Music breaks, these are the breaks. Music breaks, these are the breaks. Oh, oh.